Assessment 1 to 4. Assessment 1. Why is the form handling and validation important in web development, particularly in terms of data integrity and security? Data integrity. Form validation ensures that the data submitted by users conforms to expected formats and constraints. By checking for proper data structure and content, validation prevents corrupted or invalid data from entering the database, thus maintaining the integrity of data. Security. Form validation also protects against malicious data inputs. For instance, failing to validate input data can lead to vulnerabilities like SQL injection, XSS, and CSRF. Proper validation processes ensure that only safe data is processed and stored, protecting both the application and the user. What are some key Laravel features that help prevent security vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, CSRF, when handling form data? SQL injection prevention. Laravel uses prepared statement and parameterized queries in Eloquent ORM and the Query Builder, which automatically protects against SQL injection attacks by ensuring that user inputs are properly escaped. CSRF protection. Laravel includes built-in CSRF protection by generating a unique token for each active user session. This token must accompany any form submission to ensure that the request originated from the intended user. XSS protection. Laravel's Blade templating engine automatically escape data to prevent cross-site scripting attacks. By default, any variables output within Blade templates are escape, reducing the risk of injecting malicious JavaScript. Explain how we create a basic form in Laravel using a Blade template and handle its submission in controller. Include an example of how you would define validation rules. Blade template. First, create a form in Blade view. For example, yung create.blade.php with necessary fields, which is nakalagay na yun. The form action. Tapos yung route niya is data store, post. Controller method. In corresponding controller, define the method to handle form submission and validate the request data. How can customizing validation error messages improve the user experience in web application? Provide an example of how you would customize and display validation error messages in Blade template. Customizing validation error messages enhance user experience. Custom error messages make it easier for user to understand what went wrong and how to fix it, leading to a more user-friendly experience. Custom error messages in controller. Here's how to define custom messages in the controller. Displaying errors in Blade. In the Blade template, you can display validation errors as follow. What are the benefits of centralizing validation logic in Laravel application, and how does this contribute to the maintainability of web application? Benefit of centralizing validation logic in Laravel is the consistency. Centralized validation ensures that validation rules are consistent across various parts of the application, reducing the chance of errors and making the code easier to update. Maintainability. Centralized rules help keep the code clean and organized, making it simpler for developers to manage and modify validation logic without duplicating code. Reusability. Validation logic in Laravel can be placed in form request classes, allowing validation rules to be reused across different controllers, which simplifies testing and enhances maintainability. What is the role of middleware in Laravel's authentication system, and how does it help protect routes and resources from unauthorized access? Middleware in Laravel acts as a filter for HTTP requests, helping to control access to routes and resources. middleware specifically checks if a user is logged in before allowing access to certain routes, effectively protecting against unauthorized access. Custom middleware can also enforce specific access rules such as role-based restriction. Number two, how does Laravel's built-in authentication handle user registration and login? Include the management of session tokens and the validation of input data. Laravel built-in authentication handles user registration, login, and session management. During login, the system verifies credential, then generates and stores a session token, which it checks on each request to maintain the user's authentication state. The registration process includes validation for security data entry, ensuring user inputs are accurate and secured. Explain the importance of security measures like SQL injection, prevention, and XSS protection in login and registration form. How, how does Laravel access in preventing these vulnerabilities? Login and registration forms are prime targets for attacks like SQL injection and XSS. Laravel helps prevent these vulnerabilities by using prepared statement and automatic output escaping in blade templates, which sanitize inputs and outputs. These measures protect the database and prevent malicious scripts from compromising accounts or user data. How would you create a and apply custom middleware in Laravel to restrict access to specific routes based on user rules, such as an admin-only route? Creating and applying custom middleware for role-based access. You can create custom middleware to restrict access based on users' roles. For instance, an admin-only middleware would be written to check if a user's role is admin and then apply to specific routes. In terms of scalability, how can Laravel's authentication system can be adapted to handle a growing number of users and requests? Give examples like session management or token-based authentication. So Laravel's authentication can scale with features like session management and token-based authentication. Database-backed session or Redis-based session help distribute user session across multiple servers, supporting large numbers of users. For API-driven application, JWT or JSON Web Token or OAuth can provide stateless token-based authentication, which scales well in distributed environments by reducing dependency on session data stored server side. So access assessment number three. What are the key steps involved in implementing the create operation in Laravel? And how do blade views and form handling play in a role in this process? So, the create operation typically involves a form in blade view for user input which submits data to a controller method. The controller receives from data, validates it, and then creates a new record in database. Blade views make it easy to render and manage forms, while form handling in Laravel uses CSRF tokens to ensure requests are secured. Explain the importance of data validation and sanitation in CRUD operation, and how this Laravel ensures security when handling user input during this operation. Data validation ensures that input meets required formats, for example, valid email minimum length, which preserves data quality and integrity. Sanitation removes any harmful data. Laravel provides built-in validation rules and automatically sanitize inputs when using Eloquent and Blade, protecting against SQL injection and XSS attacks during CRUD operation. Number three, describe how would you implement the read operation in Laravel to retrieve and display data from the database using both a controller method and a blade view. Read operation Laravel. To implement read, a controller method fetch data from the database. and passes it to a blade view. The blade view then renders the data dynamically, displaying records in a table or format for users to view. What is the purpose of update operation in Laravel, and how would you handle form submission to modify existing data entries in database? The update operation modifies existing records in the database. Typically, a form pre-populated with the existing data is presented in blade view. When the form is submitted, the control validates the updated input, then saves changes to the database using Eloquent update method. Number 5. How can you ensure that the delete operation in Laravel is secure and prevents accidental or unauthorized data removal? What, what role does validation play in this process? Secure delete operation in Laravel. Deleting records should be secured to prevent accidental or unauthorized data removal. Laravel's authorization policies and confirmation prompts help confirm that only authorized users can delete data. CSRF protection and root validation further secure delete requests. Validation play a role by confirming the record's existence before attempting deletion, thus avoiding errors or unintended actions. What is the purpose of Google reCAPTCHA, and how does it enhance the security of web application when integrated with forms? Purpose of Google reCAPTCHA. Google reCAPTCHA protects web application from automated bots and spam by distinguishing between human and automated access. It adds a verification steps to form, requiring users to interact with the CAPTCHA or reCAPTCHA challenge, making it harder for bots to submit forms or access resources maliciously. Number 2, describe the process of obtaining and registering reCAPTCHA site and secret keys from Google. Why it is important to update the domain when moving from localhost to a production environment. Obtaining and registering reCAPTCHA keys. To use reCAPTCHA, you need site and secret keys from the Google reCAPTCHA admin console. After signing in, you can create a new reCAPTCHA selecting the version 2 or version 3 and adding the domain. When deploying to production, update the domain is crucial since Google verifies the that requests come from registered domains, helping prevent unauthorized use of your keys. How would you integrate reCAPTCHA into our Laravel form? Outline the steps from installing the necessary package to adding the reCAPTCHA field in the form. So first, install reCAPTCHA package and add reCAPTCHA keys to the env file, and then update the configuration to config app.php. Explain how to validate reCAPTCHA response in Laravel. What role keys in the validation process? So validating reCAPTCHA responses in Laravel. In the controller handling form submission, add gReCAPTCHA response to validation rule and use the secret key to verify the user's reCAPTCHA response. So the secret key verifies the response with Google's reCAPTCHA API, ensuring that the response token is valid and not automated. Number 5. How can customizing error messages for failed reCAPTCHA attempts improve user experience? Provide an example of how you would handle reCAPTCHA errors in Laravel controller. So customizing reCAPTCHA error messages. Custom error messages improve user experience by providing specific feedback if the reCAPTCHA validation fails. In the controller or validation logic, you can define custom messages for reCAPTCHA errors. So, by guiding users through failed attempts with clear instructions, these messages make it easier for them to retry successfully. So, add reCAPTCHA to the blade form. Add reCAPTCHA's JavaScript in your view or layout to render the widget.